Hello friends, my name is Richest D, and welcome to a new video. I just got this new central bank report that confirms all of our suspicions that we've talked about in past videos. This video can be considered a continuation of this one, so I suggest you watch it after this one. We hear these central banks speak all the time and say that the economy is stable, the labor market is stable, and the banking system is stable. No need to worry about that. Let's keep raising the stakes. What banking crisis? We have a program called BTFP, Emergency Financing for Banks, so we'll be fine. But when we open up these reports that don't make it to the media, we see that the picture is not so rosy. So let's move on to the Bank of England report, which in my view is in line with what we see from the European Central Bank, the US Fed, the Australian Reserve Bank, the Japanese Reserve Bank, and so on. Let's go through this report. It's called the Bank of England Credit Review for the third quarter of 2023, and you won't see it in the mainstream media, CNBC, Bloomberg, and so on. You'll probably only see it on my channel. That's why even the World Economic Forum is calling on governments around the world to make any information from alternative sources illegal. So I'll soon be an outlaw. The report begins by saying that the role of the central bank is to maintain monetary and financial stability. This report helps central banks to understand the credit conditions in the market. This is something Jeff Snyder talks about often. I won't show you a whole hour of his interview, but I'll briefly tell you what he says about the deflationary money that has flooded our economy. He doesn't talk about what they talk about often, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. No. He's talking about credit conditions, credit squeeze. These conditions are globally tightening in the global monetary system, and this is a very big problem. Because it affects asset prices, it affects global defaults and bankruptcies, which will increase. This will also affect global activity, which will continue to decline. We see these headlines. One of the largest real estate operators in China, Country Garden, has defaulted. Or here's another. One of the biggest players in Chinese real estate, Evergrande, is having a real meltdown, like some kind of shield coin. It's what everyone is talking about, but few are talking about what's going on behind those headlines. Here's what's happening. Tightening credit conditions. In other words, we have this deflationary money within the global banking cartel within the global banking system. And it's proven, for example, by this. This week, the U.S. Federal Reserve took another $20 billion in emergency liquidity from banks. Over the past 3 weeks, the Fed has siphoned $70 billion of liquidity out of the banking system. It feels like they are deliberately causing a crash, just like in 2008. First of all, they start with a sentence. The availability of secured credit, lenders report, for households fell in the 3 months to the end of August 2023. The availability of secured credit to the public is expected to continue to decline over the next 3 months, the fourth quarter of 2023. Our economy is set up in such a way that if credit conditions tighten, defaults will continue unabated, leading to higher unemployment. And this is consistent with what one would see in an economy that is either moving toward or already in a recession. Let's look at this graph and see what happened during the global financial crisis in 2008. It's right here. As might be expected, the availability of credit to the public then declined sharply. But look at when it started, back in late 2007. And they said then too that the economy was resilient. There would be no tinkering, and we are seeing similar credit conditions now starting in 2022. And now, too, we are being promised no recession. The economy is resilient, a suspicious resemblance. In other words, credit conditions are tightening now just as they did at the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis. It just goes to show that the elite of this world are simply lying. Central banks lie. They write in reports the truth that they hide publicly. You can just ignore what they say. But you have to watch what they do. And then I think you have to look at these reports that shed light on what they're really thinking about. What's really going on. And what they will never admit to the mainstream media. Availability of unsecured loans. Same story here. Affordability is dropping. However, here we see some similarities to 2018 and 2019. I wouldn't make a big deal of it, as the unaffordability of unsecured credit can also manifest itself at times when there was no financial crisis or recession. Unlike the unaffordability of secured credit, which was unique to the financial crises. Now let's look at the demand. Lenders reported that demand for secured home equity loans and remortgages fell in the third quarter of this year. Thus, we see not only a tightening of credit conditions, but also a reduction in the volume of loans. So what does this mean for the money supply? It will likely continue to decline. And if the money supply declines, then how can the economy maintain a sustainable growth rate? Again, I'm not claiming this is good or bad, it's just the way our economy works. It's a debt system. So in a debt-based system, if the velocity of money circulation does not increase significantly, if the money supply shrinks, if credit shrinks, it means that the economy is heading towards recession. This means that economic growth will decline. However, on the other hand, lenders reported that overall demand for unsecured loans increased slightly. So, the demand for unsecured loans increased slightly, while the demand for secured loans decreased. And this is largely due to rising interest rates, which has made mortgages more expensive. When you look at the monthly payments, they seem overwhelming. Demand for corporate lending to small businesses also remains unchanged. But what's interesting is that it's just a demand. This does not mean that it is automatically satisfied, because banks are lending more and more reluctantly and tightening credit conditions. Case in point story, when interest rates were near zero and mortgage rates were incredibly low, we had the perfect borrower. He owned real estate that he rented out and received cash flow. And he couldn't get a loan, even with a loan-to-value ratio of 40%. So even though we have, shall we say, historically average interest rates today, that doesn't mean that small and medium-sized businesses can easily get loans, even if they are literally begging for one. Now what's interesting is that credit spreads narrowed in the third quarter of this year. But lenders expect them to expand in the fourth. What does that mean? That means they are seeing slightly lower credit risks now, which they believe will increase by the end of this year. That is, they fear loan defaults. This in turn means that credit conditions will tighten further towards the end of the year and banks will be even more reluctant to lend, with lending volumes continuing to fall. And it's already evident in this graph. Lenders report that household defaults on secured loans have risen, and default losses also began to rise in the third quarter. Both values are expected to rise in the fourth quarter as well. Lenders report that the default rate on unsecured loans has not changed, but they note that the rate will also increase in the future, especially for credit cards. If we remember what is happening today with purchasing power and student loans, central banks clearly expect deterioration on these items. Look at this graph. The expectation of defaults is a huge jump above average, as shown by the orange dot. And this is especially true for secured lending, i.e., mortgages, for example. You can see on the chart a significant drop in defaults in 2021, for example. That's when the government was handing out freshly printed money to everyone at a very low interest rate during the coronavirus. But now we are seeing a credit squeeze of record proportions, and this trend of defaults and bankruptcies will continue to grow even into 2024. So, this central bank report is what's really going on, not these lies from the TV screens, from the mainstream media. Moral: whatever all these central bankers say, you have to take it with a grain of salt and realize that it is more important to pay attention to what they do than what they say. And then watching and studying these reports that come out that help us connect all the dots. This is the only way to understand what is truly going on with the economy. And this is the only way to understand what kind of decision they will make in the future. But my name is Richest D, and don't forget to watch the video that goes with it. I'll see you soon. The sequel follows.